Welcome back to the show, everybody, at another episode of the Success Shift. Today, we have a special guest with us, Zach Colman. So I'm going to actually do my introduction on Zach, but I want him to really dive into what he does. And so Zach Colman, he actually owns a grit motivational-based branding for marketing, right? An agency of that aspect. Now, again, that was a lot of words. I don't want to butcher it. But Zach, welcome to the show, my man. Thank you for coming on. If you can tell the listeners and the viewers a little bit more about you and really what your business entails.
Yeah, man. I like to say I own a grit and motivation focused branding agency, and I can dive into that a little bit more further on in the cast. But we really try to help athletic driven leaders find their why and deliver that why through brand identity and digital experiences. And what that really entails is kind of going into the intangibles more than the tangibles, right? A lot of people kind of go out there and they say, hey, I need a website, I need a brand, I need social media. I mean, I hear it every day from prospects. And it really, at the end of the day, it 99% of the time, it comes down to three things. One, that they don't understand their why yet, and so they're grasping at these technologies and these tangibles that they think are going to help them move the needle, when in fact it's them and themselves and getting past certain things. So we kind of introduce our actual tangible elements and kind of how we develop brands and how we develop our marketing efforts into the aspect of personal development. So we have certain aspects within our discovery that help people pass certain limiting factors that they may not understand. And a good way I like to put that is, you see everyone out there day to day doing different types of jobs, right? And a lot of people go, oh man, garbage man, for instance, that job's easy. When in reality, you have to look at certain things as, hey, every type of job has its hard points, has its certain situations. And that is a mindset shift in itself to help people understand that it's not as easy as it entails, but two, understanding that you need to be able to work with people and connect with people that kind of bring in that specialty that you may need at that time. But it really just dives down to helping people understand and get past certain pillars within the milestones of their business growth. And we utilize a lot of, like I said, personal development. And so we focus very heavily on athletic driven individuals because they do have a type of personality that is really driven towards, hey, they like certain things in their control. I think we all do, especially as entrepreneurs. Like, hey, I know that in what's in my control, my health, somewhat like we were just talking about. We're both sick right now, but we still try to say, hey, I'm gonna go for runs. I'm gonna eat healthy. I'm gonna do certain things that actually help us from a meditation type standpoint to help evolve us and persevere. And so that's really deep down the kinds of people that we like to work with internally within our business, is because it's grit. And back to what you were saying with the grit and the motivation style business. I mean, we can go deeper into it later, but I very much like to connect with individuals that I bring into my business that match similar values. So I try to bring those people in. And so that's why I consider us a grit and motivational focus agency, because everyone on our team has some aspect of, they want to build themselves personally. They like to do some sort of athletics. And what it does is it does two things. It helps us build in internal culture with the people that I work with, but it also helps us build more passionate and creative projects and deliverables for our clients. And so that's really where the motivation and grit focus part of the branding agency comes in. And hopefully that answers your question a little bit better.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love how you tied everything in there, right? Like, I think athletes do very well in business because of that drive focus and that competitive aspect. How do you feel leadership though, and the why behind it links together in entrepreneurship and branding?
Yeah, first off, nothing against most athletes. I mean, we worked with athletes for years, and they have this aspect of grit and motivation. They went years and years, and they're the top 1% of the 1%, right? But a lot of them do lack the business knowledge or the entrepreneurship knowledge coming in. And so that's where athletes becoming leaders, uh, understanding leadership and understanding going through some of those pain points really benefits is kind of understanding how to brand themselves. Um, but back to your original question, how does leadership and can you say that again? How does leadership connect to
The why.
the why? Well, at the end of the day, leadership is marketing.
Mm.
And so as you continue to grow, you can kind of look at this. You start off entrepreneurship, no one knows what they're doing, right? I mean, I always say I've learned more in 1 year of being an entrepreneur than I did at, you know 10 years in the corporate world, moving up on the ladder. And I was pretty high in the ladder by the time that I left, and I still learned more in 1 year. And being a when you first come out, you kind of get this aspect of everyone tells you, I need to delegate. I need to delegate. I need to have other people do the smaller tasks, which is true. But the problem usually comes down to it's hard to delegate when you don't have systems, and
Mm.
you're doing everything yourself. But two, you don't understand business quite yet. I mean, you might have worked at a 10 million, a $20 million, $1 billion company. Who knows? Uh, you don't really understand when you first start, and this is part of that mindset shift that people go through. That making $100,000 to $200,000 a year. I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's you can do that by yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not until you reach 500 to a million that you should start really realizing, all right, I'm going to have to start bringing teams on. And so realistically, when you worked in the corporate world, the reason they had all these benefits and they were able to pay you 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 100, 200, whatever they paid you, was because they were a $20 billion company. 200,000, you can't. And so I look at leadership as a spectrum of, if you're able to connect with certain people and think of yourself as, really, I'm not going to say a mentor, but more of someone that can help other people. That's really what leadership does. And that comes back to the marketing side we were talking about. Because if you're able to lead, you're able to get other people to follow your vision, follow what you're doing, and you'll be able to bring on partnerships and other people that are kind of your champions, that are willing to go above and beyond for you and your company, because they love the vision that you're trying to push out into the world.
Yeah. It's funny as how many things you've said in the last 2 minutes that I reflect into our business, and I teach our agents, right? Because they're entrepreneurs ourselves. Your vision, your mission, leadership is entrepreneurship, right? And the whole task of just what leadership is as a whole, right? Absolutely huge. The how do you? I feel like, and the why is what I want to pull back here, but I feel like so many people have a hard time grasping their why behind what they're doing. And when you truly find that why, right? They say it should make you cry, for example. But the aspect of when you find that why, the behind the reason of what you're doing this, it changes your motivational state and your mental state to a whole nother level when it comes to succeeding in entrepreneurship and business, right? And so for you, what are tools that you do to extract people's why, and how can people that are listening right now start to write down things on how they could pull away their why to go excel in business?
Well, I'll first off to say, I don't think it's wrong to not know your why when you first start out in business. I mean, I think it's detrimental, and I think especially when you're smaller, you should be grasping at multiple things. You should be trying different things, even if you're really niche, like a real estate agent. Maybe you should be saying, hey, maybe I'm going to work on the lending side. Maybe I will be focused on commercials. Maybe I'll focus on apartments. Maybe I'll focus on Airbnb. Like, you'll have so many different things that you could focus on within any spectrum, right? And each one of those is going to have a different market. So you could try different things at the beginning. It's not until you start building a portfolio or you start growing that you start to realize, hey, like, I actually hate 80% of what I do. And that's part of starting to articulate your why. It's very similar in my world to a rebrand. Companies going through a rebrand perspective. Everyone thinks it's just taking a logo and going on a screen and saying, oh, hey, I'm gonna shift this here, and I'm gonna say, hey, let's just change this color. And everyone's like, I can't believe that company spent $100,000 and they just shifted this. And it's like, no, they're really changing their personality because they're evolving is a brand, and they're saying, hey, we're going to start really committing towards this. So back to your original question, ways they can start focusing on their why early. I mean, I'm first to say with my story that I had a certain why when I first started. I was grasping at multiple things, trying to find different things. And I mean, shit, I still have some clients that I had in the past that we still work with, but aren't necessarily our vision for the future. And so personal development and becoming that leader, I think, becoming a self leader, I think is first on that list. I like to kind of sit down, especially when you're just starting and you're not like, hey, maybe I don't have the money to hire a team yet. Maybe I'm just starting off by myself. Or you're at that period of, hey, I need to start delegating, but I don't necessarily want to hire someone from the other side of the world because I can't talk to them on a normal basis. So you have to start thinking of your personal values. Back to the athletic driven side, like, me personally, I kind of lost some of my personal values in the growth of my business because I think we all fall into the grind. We go, oh, hey, I need to work 80 hours a week to grow a business. I need to beat my competitors. It's like, no, not really. Not really. You should be working. You should have other people working it and making sure, like you said earlier, working on all those big goals, or you working on those small goals. But if you're not happy in your life and you're not doing certain things that you feel are going to actually make you happy as an individual, then you're not going to perform in the business. You're just not. And so once you start articulating those personal values, for me, for instance, grit and perseverance is one of our internal values, because I'm really big on, hey, we're going to try something. I try something at the gym. I try something for a run. I try a workout. I try food. I mean, I've been on keto 4 times. I tried keto 4 times. I've done paleo. I've done so many different things, but I try it to the point where I'm like, is this effective? Am I going to utilize this or not? For instance, when I was on keto, I did it twice for a month. Turned out to be dirty keto. I didn't really like it. And then out of nowhere, a year later, when I was like, I'm going to persevere, I'm going to try this again, I was on it for a whole year in ketosis and did it for a whole year. I decided to stop because I didn't feel like it was healthy for my body anymore. And so my value is that. So I took that value from my personal life and I eventually turned it into a brand value. Like, all right, if I find this a value personally and I want to connect with like-minded people, either if it be clients, team, whoever, I'm going to make sure that I do that. And so I think that that's a first way that people can really start defining their why is, hey, what are my personal values? What do I like to do? And what are the things that I think can help me persevere past certain situations and introduce those into the culture of who I am, my family, for instance, and my friends, and how can I push that forward with the growth of my business? Because that internal side plays a lot more on the external side as you continue to grow and find your why. Me personally, I didn't have values for the first, 3, 4 years of my business. I was a marketing agency. I was grabbing multiple clients in. We said we were going to work with athletes, and we started working with athletes due to, I can tell you some stories from my past, but but what ended up happening was I was doing so much for so many, even with athletes, because athletes want 80 different things. I couldn't systematize. I was doing more than I should. I was overserving them because they weren't doing their necessities to grow their own business. And so I was like, I'm so very passionate about this industry because I grew up in it. But what do I do? And that's what got me to shift towards my why of working with gyms. And so from a personal level, it's kind of taking that step back and saying, hey, what are my personal values? Leveraging those values to also help become your true authentic self, I think is phenomenal, because you can start to sit down and say, what is my brand voice going to be? Who am I? Because if I value integrity, that means my brand voice and who I'm talking to through the world. I'm going to be honest. I'm not blunt. I mean, sometimes, but for the most part, I'm just honest with people, and I make sure that all my communication is has some sort of integrity. And so, integrity is another one of our brand values, because I'm just a very honest person. I hate wishy-washy. I hate people trying lies. I hate all that stuff. And so, I make sure that all our messaging, me from who I talk to, how I talk to them. For instance, if I'm talking to somebody about, hey, let's work together type of scenario, and they're just not a good fit, I'll basically just tell them, hey, I just don't think you're a good fit. And so I take certain experiences in my life and I'll write down examples. And then that's those examples will what I'll use when I'm hiring, when I'm working with other people. I'll be like, well, when have you been in experience with a client when you've done this? And if they come back and they're like, oh yeah, I totally just ignored them and did that, I'm like, all right, well, you may be a good fit somewhere else, but I'm sorry. We like to be honest with our clients. And so that's where that connection side comes in, right? And building connection with yourself. And I think that that's probably a good start, personal development type start. I like to go back to triggers, triggers from your past.
Mm.
What kind of things have you learned from that made you who you are? Because it's going to detrimentally impact the way that you talk to people, the way that you interact with people, becoming a leader. Most brands are mostly from an external and an internal component, really just an expression of the leadership team behind the scenes.
Yeah, 100%. There's four things I wanted to pull off that, and then I had a few questions for you, Zach. I mean, for one, you talked about systems a lot, right? Like how important is systems to business? I mean, obviously we know, but like let's talk about the completely formatting a system to where you don't have to start to think, you just have action and doing within the system. How important would you say it is to a fundamental business?
I think that's a double-edged sword. And what I mean by that is I think systems are great. I'm a technical expert if anyone's taken the culture index. So I'm very process oriented. If you've ever taken a color test, I'm a blue red. So, I'm process oriented type leader. So I'm very operational. And that's one thing I'm good at, but it always makes me overthink things. If you say that and put processes in place. And so, from a good aspect, systems are great. Finding a good system or two or three and having them communicate with each other, because you're never going to find a one size fits all. I think it's phenomenal. And I think that it definitely helps. And I'll just use this as an example. We have one of our project managers on staff. We utilize a lot of our Google Docs because they're live, and our Excel sheets and their Google Sheets with ClickUp. So we use both of those. She's been having a very hard time with utilizing some of her stuff within the Google Sheets. And I'm like, why? What's going on here? I don't understand. The system was still there. We introduced it to ClickUp, and because of her personality and her age, it just it just hit her better. And so just adding a component like that has already helped us tenfold. And we use ClickUp for all our other stuff, but for our outreach, we weren't really utilizing it that much. And so I finally got that implemented, and it's already been a game changer just one day because we're able to track a lot more stuff. So I think systems are very detrimental. From a negative aspect, it's very easy to think a system or a technology is gonna be your golden ticket.
Yeah, 100%, right. And that's accurate. That is very, very accurate. Systems don't make you golden tickets, but systems allow things to start to process on a level to where you don't have to think, and you can now think about other things, right? And so yeah, I 100% agree with you on that aspect. Um and taking that further, you said something that I think is huge. It was, hey, when you're getting started, grasp onto everything. And then once you get a flow and you can start to figure out what your niche is, diving into that niche, right? And so you can consider that, let's say, this goes across all companies, but let's say you're in a business of recruiting, right? And you're recruiting people, you can recruit people of all aspects, right? And then as you start to grow and you start to find your niche, well, then you can start to recruit people that are more of your niche. Maybe that niche is athletic driven individuals. Maybe that niche is veterans of military, right? Maybe that niche is, teachers or caretakers, right? Like whatever it is, you start to find that niche. Um, I think it's really important, and you said it, to go try everything and then start to wind in and find out that niche, right? What do you feel? Do you ever see anybody that tries to like just pinpoint one thing right away? And do you see that as a positive or a negative aspect?
I have integrity, man. I'm going to say it's a negative. I've firsthand experience from this. Like I said, I decided 2 years in I was going to focus on professional athletes, and I think that in itself actually held me back from testing and doing certain things, and it actually held my growth back. Two, uh, and not to use 2020 as a good example, but it is a good example. And I was just talking to a couple of other business owners in my field, actually one this morning who owns a $2 million agency. And we were talking about niching in specific. And she's like, if you're at certain niches, you won't be able to diversify. So if you get to a point where you're, for instance, working on residential and or commercial, and something happens where residential just takes a plummet, but commercial skyrockets, you won't necessarily lose your business, right? So you have to think about those types of things. And so you do have to somewhat diversify your types of clientele and somewhat, and there's strategic ways to do that. But niching, niching in itself, I'm not going to say I think it's a gimmick, but I think it's a good thing to niche, but I think people take niching the wrong way. I think that people take niching as, hey, for instance, I just want to work with dentists, for instance. I would say, yeah, you can learn systems around dentists, but if you start off with just dentists, you're not going to have any sort of portfolio to learn and test and do certain things off of. And so you have to go a certain realm. And I mean, I think that was blatant for me. I told you I worked with professional athletes, but most professional athletes don't like to do anything. Nothing against them, but they just don't understand certain things in business, and they made so much already that they're like, I don't want to spend 40 hours a week trying to grow this thing, you know? And so they think that the marketing agency is just going to solve all their problems. When in reality, it's like, no, there's still a lot of grit and determination you have to go through to create your own thing, right? We're just a hand. We're just a hand to that. And so we didn't have a chance to sit down and help them the way we wanted to. And I always was telling myself, like, how can we help them more? And that's where our pivot started to come in, because I was like, we're creating these great brands, we're helping them be seen in the world. But for instance, the athletes still had a hard time wanting to post on social media or do a post because they were afraid of certain limiting beliefs that they had from childhood trauma or from playing in the sport, whatever it may be. And so that's where the personal development came in and said, hey, we're not going to be able to help these people do this without going through this type of situation. And so back to your question on niching, I would say that, hey, like, yeah, I think niching is good, but I would not overthink it, nor would I not put it in some sort of category as you continue to grow. But when you first start, I mean, I'm really just pushing my niche now, and you know, I'm at the point now where it's like, yeah, I tried a million things, and now we're gonna drop half the crap out and go strong on one.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that too. And you talked about something else, which I want to put a pin in because I think it's going to key in later. But it was the limiting beliefs and how it holds people back. And so I want to put a pin in that because that's extremely important. But I had one more question more about kind of what you do before we kind of take that journey into your path to where you are. Branding as a whole, how do you feel branding is as a whole for entrepreneurs, athletes, business people? And I'm talking more in the sense for the ones that aren't focusing on branding themselves, right? Like how important do you feel it is?
I feel like it's how do I explain this correctly? Branding is one of those things where people don't do it because they don't feel like it has any sort of tangible result. You can't put a number to it. You can't put a certain thing to it. So most people don't do it, but it's by far the most important. Why? Because it's your foundations. Once you have your why from a personal level, like you said, and your how and your who, you're able to go through and power not just your teammates but your clients, and it's what helps that waterfall of growth. It may take time. It's not going to solve the end of the world problem of you starting to go from a 100,000 to $1 million business, but it's definitely going to help. Help that. But I would say any sort of marketing efforts that I see people do, they usually spend 100 times more in ad spend or trying 80 different things because they haven't sat down and done the foundations. So in
Mm,
fact, they're saving a lot of money because they're like, oh, we're going to figure this out. But no one does it because everyone looks at the now and not the future, right?
right.
So I say it's probably the most crucial thing most people can do. And from a branding perspective, and what I do is we kind of, back to what I was saying earlier, is that's what we kind of do. I am a very big component of helping organizations and teams develop a brand that helps develop them as a team. And so we go in there and we have a whole set of brand discovery type exercises and things that we do to not just help leadership understand, like, oh, this is where we're going. Oh, this is why we focus on this person. This is, oh, who is this? And help them get stuff organized, but also understand the psychological counterpart of their audience. They go in and they just think demo most of the time. We're focusing on women that are 50 that make 100 a year. Okay, but you just going on social media and saying, "Hey, we help this person that makes this much." You're not going down to their deep core desires, right? You're not going down to, like, what's the reasoning for you on this planet? Like, what is the reason for you to help these people? And so branding is meant to help you not just be able to, like we said earlier, be able to build connection with yourself and with other people. Uh, it's also meant to build confidence, to lead, to self lead, to act, to try things, and contribute. Find your who. Why are you contributing? Well, because this is what we're great at, and this is what we want to do. All right, let's push that then, because then you're gonna have a lot more uh, ability within yourself to find out why you want to help these people, because you're passionate about helping these types of people, instead of just going out there and saying, hey, we just need to make a crap load of money, let's go.
Right, right. And I like that perspective of linking that why to your branding and making that what you push. Super super important, right? And because now you're pushing a mission, right? You're pushing a mission and a vision that people can actually grab onto. But I think you're right. A lot of people don't realize the importance of branding because it's not something you see the effective right away. But, 2, 3, 4, or 5 years down the line is when that starts to tenfold, itself and really people now know you for a certain reason. Right. And so I think that's huge. But I wanted to kind of take a path down Right. Like, so your aspect is a branding marketing agency, but I wanted to take the path of how you got there, right? What made you choose that first and foremost? And did you do anything else prior?
Oh, yeah. This is a good question. This goes into my story a little bit of my past. And so when I was a kid, my dad was an NFL player. Not when I was a kid. He played 1 or 2 years, about 10, 15 years before I was born. But I grew up trying to idolize my dad. I started playing soccer so that I could become a kicker like him. And to be honest, I wasn't the greatest soccer player. I would have been a better football player because I can tackle the shit out of people. Um, but I'd always get red carded. Um, but it took me some time to realize that I couldn't follow my dad's footsteps. I had to follow my own footsteps, right? And that's part of the reason I started working with professional athletes, as it kind of helps part of the things from your past, right? And so I did the normal what everyone did in college, very similar to starting a business, right? I was like, hey, I'm going to try this program at this school. I didn't like it. Then I was going to get into video games. I'm like, I'm not going to be 40-year-old and make video games. Like, that's not me. I'm glad I didn't, because now I don't literally have an attention span of 10 minutes with my children. Um, and then I went to ASU and I went back into the design program, and I fell in love with it because it was much more foundational, no programs like the technology, like that stuff wasn't existent. It was all like, all right, we're gonna like sit down, you're gonna teach yourself the foundations of how to communicate this to people. So funny enough, it wasn't until recently that I realized that that was a subconscious way of me trying to be seen and heard. Because when I was a kid, I tried to be seen and heard so much. I tried so hard that I wasn't. I wasn't seen and heard by other people. I mean, I'd be the ones that threw the parties. I'd always have people over just to be liked, right? And it did the exact opposite. I got taken advantage of. I overserved, things of that nature. So that's really why I got into the field to begin with. And as I started to evolve in that career, I worked for large organizations. Like, I worked for the Phoenix Suns, I worked for Pearson Education, and I job hopped a lot. And of course, at the time then I thought it was for the money, but then I realized it was more because I could learn everything in like a month, and I was surpassing every single person in the corporation, and then I was bored, and so I'd move on. And I was at my last about 4 months at Pearson Education, as an art director. Like I said, I job hop, so I would always test waters just because I like to connect with people. And I got an opportunity to go out to New York to work on American Express's website. They were going to fly me out there. It was always my dream to work in New York. I think for a lot of designers, it is. A lot of people, it is. And they offered me a contract. I think it was like 6 month contract. They were going to pay for my housing twice as much in 6 months that I would have made at my job. I would have made about 120, I think, in 6 months. And I was only 30 years old at the time, so that was a lot for a 30-year-old. And I actually turned it down because I was fearful. I was fearful over, oh, well, what am I going to do after that 6 months? A week later, I regretted it. I tried to get it. They told me no. They gave it to somebody else. But that experience actually pushed me. I was like, all right, well, I'm not going to let this down. I think this just proves I need to go out on my own. And so I strategically planned about 3 more months of working at my job, making sure that I had enough in my savings uh, that I could go out on my own. And I, worked freelance, did freelance jobs here and there, and I had about 30 saved up. And so I said, all right, I'm going to live off 30 grand for the next, year as I see if I can get this to work. And, you know, good for me that it did, because now I do that. But two, off subject, now I feel like I could live off 30 grand here because I had to do it. I had to do it
Right?
for a year.
I
So,
know. Yeah, that's 100% accurate. You said the biggest key thing that I have to touch on is you allowed an opportunity to pass up because the fear of the unknown, what's next. How many I'm not even going to ask that question. I'm going to say I'm actually going to change that the question to a statement. There are so many entrepreneurs that don't dive into entrepreneurship because of that right there, the fear of the unknown, right? The fear of, can I make it? Right? There's a statement, I forget who actually said this, but um, how fast would you run if you knew you couldn't fail? Right? And so the fear of failure is what holds people back from entrepreneurship. And I actually want to link that to what you said a moment ago that I wanted to put a pin in, was limiting beliefs and triggers of the past. How much of that connects as a whole, do you think, from your standpoint? And do you even have a personal kind of example of how that all linked up for you?
Yeah, I think, and I'm just gonna say this. We talked a little bit ago about how I'm at this point right now, right, where I'm like, hey, I'm finally out of this period of you know we call it valley of death once you get to the $300,000 to $700,000 range, and I was like, it took me 2 years. Took me 2 years. I had the same situation happen. The same situation happened where and I was like, oh, I have to evolve. I have to either niche down or I have to, point myself in a different direction with my vision. Like, what do I do? I had to rebrand, so to say. And so I had that same thing of failure. I'm like, I don't want to start over again. I don't want to do this. So
Mm,
it is one of those things where, you know, triggers and situations can come up multiple times in your life, and you have to have retrospect of, like you said, like what helped you get there, why did this happen, and know that, hey, it's a continued work on yourself perspective multiple times, and not try to get anyone down that's just starting out, but it's how you evolve as a person, and even as a business, right? So I would say what really got me here, what had me be put in that situation, was just the comfort. I think what every W-2 employee has. I think it's the being comfortable knowing, hey, I actually made a very decent pay for where I was at. I mean, it wasn't like $100,000 a year. I was making like $70,000 a year, and so that's pretty comfortable. I already had me and my wife, who were still dating at the time. You know, we already had a house we purchased, not full out, but we already had a house. And it's a good amount of money to have from a one person that I was content.
yeah,
So
you're
I think
content.
that the being content, I think, is really what holds people back, is because they look at their job and they say, hey, I'm comfortable here, I'm safe.
Yeah.
When in reality, it wasn't until that day after I left that I was like, mind blowing realization that I'm like, I wasn't safe. They could have let me go anytime they wanted.
I
Now
was
I'm
literally
safe.
just about to say that. It's this persona that when you have a job, you're secure, right? But they could literally let you go at any time. Anytime your job is up for grabs, right? When you're in a corporate place, you're just a number, right? You're not a person. And your job is up for grabs for at any moment. And so when most people feel with a 9 to 5 that they're secure, they're actually not secure. They're subject to one paycheck away from, disaster, right? That's really important. But I want to keep on going with where you're going on that, on just really how those triggers, you realize what do you do when you realize that trigger of that limiting belief of failure potential, right? What do you personally do on that?
Well, first you have to know they're there. And I've had a coach that has helped me for the last year and a half, actually. First, you have to recognize these triggers. Then you have to be able to, so that you can change those habits, right? And so one of my pillars, and how what I kind of do to help other people with how the branding helps develop a team, right, is you kind of have to go into some of those. And so I talked a lot about connection, but self confidence and is another is a huge one. So confidence to me is probably the most important pillar in how you could help develop a brand that helps develop yourself. Because I would say that if you have confidence in yourself, you're going to be a little bit more willing to take risks,
Yes.
to act, to do certain things. How do you build confidence in yourself? Well, one, you don't have an ego. There's another one of my values. I'm very big on no one having an ego in my business. Confidence, yes, needed, very much so. But you have to kind of come in and you have to kind of say, hey, like, I'm going to try this. And if it doesn't work, and I'll use this as a great example. Last year, I spent $20,000. Well, I spent 20,000 on Zoom Info, which is a huge database to help find people to work with. And I also had a sales rep I hired. He was my third one. Well, he was the second at the time. And I hired him beforehand, and I got Zoom Info. Neither of those worked out. And so I tried them. And what did I have to come to the realization of? Okay, it was a very expensive failure, but I now realize I that I'm not either ready for that position yet, because I can't document and process certain things as good as I want, or two, um, it's because of my beliefs. I've never been a fan of doing outreach, and so because it's not branding, it's not relationship building, and so I was like, I tried something that other people told me I should try, and I fell into that spectrum, and it's not for me. So I learned from those failures. And so I think confidence in itself and being able to look at those failures, any failure that happens, small or big, and say, hey, what can I learn from this and act on? You look at the big brands, and that's why I really try to push how everyday people can look at themselves as brands, as those world-class brands do. Because you think about their beliefs, their messages and their values, their beliefs are, hey, we're going to be able to go out and try this. And if we don't, we have limited money, right? We just go out and try this. It doesn't work. We'll move on. People don't see that from the outside. You look at everyday people, we don't have that ability. We have that ability to say, hey, we're going to try one or two things. And so that's actually what probably stops a lot of people from growing is that in taking those leaps is that confidence in themselves. And so that goes back to me being unseen and unheard, right? I had to get past the fear of trying to grow my business for this invisible number of success that I thought I had to do to prove to everyone from high school and college that I was better than them. And I had to go to myself and say, hey, I have a family now. Like, this is actually more important than me. And I'm actually doing a lot better than I would say probably 95% of the people I went to high school with in college. And so I'm like, what does success look like for me? And that's what made me go down that path. Um, but I needed to build confidence, continue to build confidence in myself and allow myself to go, hey, these people aren't able to control me, and I am being seen and heard. I'm being seen by other people. And so looking at some of those past triggers and how they can hold you back from building confidence in yourself is probably a huge hurdle that people can go through to try to build that ability to get past some of those limiting beliefs.
Yeah. I that is so crucial to a foundation of success, and I took a few pieces of everything and I put them into just words that I think everyone needs to focus on to be able to have that success foundation is one, just your own confidence, right? The confidence in yourself to be able to go to achieve what you desire to achieve. The second one really being understanding your triggers, understanding your triggers and your personal limiting beliefs. Because I think it takes a long time to actually get over your limiting beliefs, and there's a lot of groundwork that's to be done. But when you
Yeah.
can at least realize them and accept them, you're already beating them, right? When you don't allow them to defeat you, I think the problem is most people, and I'm not gonna say I think I know, most people don't understand that trigger as an actual trigger, right? It's just their subconscious is symbolizing it and it's trying to protect itself, and so they don't realize that's a trigger for them, and so they're already backing themselves out of the situation. And I think when you can have a strong enough mindset, which comes from personal development, to understand when you're having a trigger occur, you're already beating it because now you can understand, hey, this is a trigger. Now let's figure out what made this trigger so we can actually break that limiting belief. But when you at least understand there's a trigger, you can get over it and you can continue to push forward, right? And so understanding the fact of first and foremost to success, you have to have self-confidence, right? Having your why, understanding when a trigger is coming through, and knowing how to go through that trigger to continue your success and not letting it back you down is absolutely, I think, key fundamentals to being able to build a successful business and an entrepreneurship journey, right? But if you could, and obviously I can't believe it's already been about 45 minutes, but if I feel like I can continue talking for another couple hours, but if you could just guide people on that are going through their entrepreneurship journey, and this could be maybe someone hit that 100K mark and they're stuck. Maybe they haven't hit the 100K mark yet and because they're scared, right? A failure. What would be something that you feel you could guide people to do to help them realize their situation and pursue where they desire to go?
I'd probably say very simply take more time for yourself. I'd say go out and find certain things in your life that you may have settled on within what you're doing in the corporate world and find those things to help bring a little bit more happiness in because a lot of people stay consistent in the corporate world because they're comfortable. They don't really want to grow. So those people that at least go are at that point where they're thinking about it know that they want to make a change. And change only happens from changing your environment and working, being able to look at things that you may not have looked at before from a different perspective. And so being able to find things that you may have stopped. Like for me, it was, hey, I'm going to start going to the gym more. I'm going to start running more. I got really big into running and I started doing that stuff on a normal basis, which actually helped me have more time to think, have more creative thought, and know at the end of the day, if I started my business, that hey, if I'm already doing these things on my own, myself, and I'm enjoying these, how do I build a business around this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really key. Understanding why you're doing the business in the first place, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then that confidence. I think the first foremost is building that confidence factor because you got to have confidence in yourself to start a business, right? Like we said, the fear of failure. And that's the biggest thing that pull people back. And when you can at least have the confidence on yourself, which in reality costs $0, right? To believe in yourself, right? It costs you no money to believe in yourself. If you can build the confidence in yourself, I think that is the number one tool to have to go build your success.
Well, and it's hard because, and I know we're getting close to the end here, but uh, it, to put a positive note on things, I mean, confidence is going to be an ongoing thing. I
Oh,
mean, I just went out and started doing not just podcasts. I mean, I have a YouTube channel. I've done podcasts. I had this fear of going out and doing public speaking about a year to 2 years ago, and I'm like, how do I evolve as a person? And I had to take those steps, and I'm still taking those steps. But I love it now. You know, I love going on stage, and it took me a year or two to get past that. But just so people are aware that are starting to build confidence, it's a cycle. So you start building self confidence in yourself, you'll be able to lead other people and lead others better. All the assets and all the stuff you go at the podcast you go on, the way you market yourself, the way you do that, that's all going to get stronger because communication, no matter what kind of form of communication is, people can see that confidence in what you put out there to the world. Even the graphic design that we do and the visual communications that we do, it's the same concept. And once that starts doing better and you start seeing building some momentum with that, your confidence is going to rise. And so it's a cycle that you can build
yes.
off and build momentum off of.
Yes, 100%. But like you said, it's always an ongoing cycle because you constantly have to rebuild your confidence. I mean, you know, the raw reality of it is it doesn't matter how successful you get, there's always doubt that creeps in, past triggers,
Always.
past triggers,
Yep.
right? Past traumas, that will always creep in. And so understanding that's part of the ongoing battle to life itself, but more importantly, knowing and not allowing that to defeat you is really key, right? So, Zach, thank you, man, for coming on. Honestly, again, I could have talked for a couple hours on this aspect of just how everything from branding to confidence all leads to just a successful path of entrepreneurship. Um, if you could say one last just positive punch note for somebody to go take action today on and not wait, what would you say is the key factor for them to start?
Do it. Just try. You can't succeed. You can't succeed or fail without trying. So just try.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Well, thanks, Zach, for coming on. I look forward to conversating with you more. Absolutely. And having you on again on the show. And if there's any way that I can bring value to you, of course, please let me know. But thank you for coming on the show. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of The Success Shift. We're here. We're all about cultivating your entrepreneur confidence. Have a great day, everyone.